The galaxy was ancient, older than human imagination had words for. Empires rose and fell like tides. Species ascended to greatness only to fade into dust, and the stars themselves bore witness to civilizations whose names were long forgotten. Among these countless powers, the human confederacy was young. Barely 3 centuries had passed since humanity broke free of Sol's cradle and flung itself into dark between the stars. Compared to the old races, the glacial-minded Aarket Dominion, the crystalline Keln, or the brutal Zoran, the humans were still children. And yet, there was something in them that the other races never quite understood. A restlessness, a fierce memory, and a peculiar obsession with debts, oaths, and promises. To the galaxy, humans were innovators, scavengers, and fighters who survived against odds. Useful in alliances, troublesome in politics, but not truly threatening. To most alien powers, humans were a species that could be safely underestimated. But there was one thing the galaxy did not know. Humanity never forgot a kindness. The Forgotten War. Long before humans walked among the stars, Earth had been a fragile world on the edge of annihilation. The Valari, an elegant, long-lived species with pale, luminous skin and minds attuned to empathy, had once been strong. They had roamed the galaxy as explorers, healers, and scholars. In that forgotten age, the Valari had discovered Earth at a time of peril. Humanity, still fractured into warring nations and empires, had faced extinction. Some records claimed it was an asteroid predicted to strike the planet. Others whisper of an alien predator species drawn to Earth's biosphere. Whatever the truth, humanity would not have survived. The Valari intervened quietly, shielding the fragile world and diverting the threat. They asked for nothing in return. Most species in the galaxy would have forgotten the act. The Valari themselves barely remembered it, for to them, it had been a small kindness, one of many gestures offered to primitive civilizations across the ages. But humanity remembered. The story of the star-born saviors was passed down in myths, in whispers, in hidden records among Earth scholars and archivists. When humans finally reached the stars and found the Valari again, the old tale was confirmed. And from that moment, humanity carried a weight. A debt owed is never forgotten. A debt unpaid is a shadow that follows you. The Valari's fall. By the time humanity entered the interstellar community, the Valari were shadows of what they had once been. Their great fleets were gone, their once thriving colonies reduced to vulnerable enclaves. They had chosen peace for too long. And in the galaxy, peace was often mistaken for weakness. The predators of the galaxy circled them like wolves. Chief among these predators was the Zoran Dominion. The Zoran were feared by all, a brutal empire of scaled warriors and tyrannical warlords who respected only conquest. Their fleets had burned countless worlds, and their soldiers took pleasure in crushing civilizations that could not resist them. When the Zoran demanded tribute from the Valari, ships, slaves, and resources, the Valari refused, not out of pride, but because they had nothing left to give. And so the Zoran came with fire and steel. The galaxy watched and did nothing. The Valari were already a dying people. Why waste fleets and soldiers to save them? To most empires, the Valari were simply another victim of galactic Darwinism. No one expected anyone to intervene. The plea for help, Velar Prime, the last great homeworld of the Valari, sent out a desperate plea into the void. The transmission was carried across trade networks and diplomatic relays, but it was half-hearted even as it was sent. The Valari knew no one would answer. The plea was not a call for salvation, but for remembrance, that someone, somewhere, might mourn their passing. But the signal reached Sol, and for the humans, it was not merely another tragedy of the stars. It was a call of a debt. Humanity's choice. The human confederacy was not a superpower. Their fleets were modern but small, their colonies scattered. To stand against the Zoran was suicide. The Galactic Council warned them to stay out of it. The larger empires whispered that humans would doom themselves if they dared to interfere. But in the chambers of confederacy, there was no debate. One simple truth guided them. The Valari had saved humanity once, long ago. The Valari had given humanity the chance to become what it was. That debt had lingered for millennia. And now, at last, there was a chance to repay it. The Confederacy mobilized. Entire shipyards were lit with furious activity. Reserve fleets were called into service. Civilian industries were repurposed into war production. The humans moved with a speed and unity that stunned the galaxy. When the Valari's plea was answered, it was not with platitudes or excuses. It was with a message. To the people of Velar, we are humanity. Long ago, when we were weak, you saved us. That debt has not been forgotten. Today, we stand as your shield. You are not alone. The galaxy reacts. The galaxy was stunned. The great powers mocked the humans, declaring them foolish, reckless, suicidal. Analysts predicted the Confederacy would be annihilated within months. Some minor species admired the gesture, but pitted humanity's doom. Only the Valari wept. For the first time in centuries, their people felt hope. They did not know if humanity could truly stop the Zoran, but they knew one thing beyond doubt. They would not face extinction alone, and that, for a people who had been abandoned by the galaxy, meant everything. The march to war, across human space, the call to arms resounded. Soldiers volunteered in droves. Ship crews swore oaths to fight until the Valari were safe. Even civilian freighters were refitted with weapons and armor. Humanity had never forgotten the debt. And now, with fire in their hearts and steel in their hands, they would repay it in full. And in the shadows of the galaxy, as alien empires watched the humans mobilize, a whisper began to spread. If this is how humans repay a debt, how will they treat their enemies? The Valari had prepared for extinction. Their once proud cities were reduced to crumbling shells, their fleets little more than museum relics. On Velar Prime, civilians crowded into underground shelters, listening to the endless drone of Zoran warships in orbit. The Dominion had come with the full weight of its cruelty. Dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, troop carriers filled with scaled shock troops, and orbital siege platforms that darkened the skies. Valari leaders met in silence, resigned to their end. Their transmission to surrender was ready, not out of cowardice but mercy. Better to spare the last remnants of their kind than to watch their world burn. But before the signal could be sent, the stars themselves seemed to ripple. The arrival. Sensors screamed. Thousands of warp signatures ignited on the edge of the system, spreading like wildfire across the void. At first, the Valari thought it was the rest of the Dominion's fleet, come to finish them with overwhelming force. But then the readings came. Hull configurations unknown, warp drives compact and efficient, energy signatures far beyond anything the Valari had seen in centuries. The Dominion sneered. More prey, their admirals declared. Some minor species has wandered into the fire. But when the first ships emerged, the sneer faltered. Human warships were nothing like the sleek, ceremonial cruisers of the older empires. They were predators, angular, brutal silhouettes of steel and composite, blackened against the stars. Rows of kinetic launch bays lined their hulls like the teeth of beasts. Railgun spines glowed faintly, ready to hurl slugs a fraction of light speed. And escorting them were swarms of drones, thousands of semi-autonomous attack craft buzzing around their carriers like angry wasps. The largest of them, the dreadnought Soul's Wrath, transmitted a single message to the system. Valari, we heard your cry. Humanity remembers. You are not alone. The first engagement. The Zoran responded with laughter. Arrogant warlords scoffed at the newcomers. What could a young species do against the Dominion, which had crushed civilizations for millennia? Their fleet moved to intercept. Dozens of Zoran warships formed a wall, their commanders eager to show the galaxy the futility of resistance. But the humans did not fight as the galaxy fought. Where other species favored predictable formations and ritualized combat doctrines, humans fought like wolves, fast, cunning, and merciless. Their fleets did not meet the Zoran head-on. Instead, they split into hunting packs, darting through asteroid fields and slingshotting around planetary gravity wells. Kinetic projectiles, simple rods of dense metal accelerated by mass drivers, rained down with devastating force, bypassing shields the Zoran thought impregnable. Drones swarmed the Zoran ships, overwhelming their point of defense with sheer numbers. Kamikaze drones detonated against shield generators, punching holes for railgun fire to rip through armor. And then came the human boarding pods. Where most species avoided direct combat inside ships, Humans embraced it. Drop pods slammed into Zoran hulls, cutting through with plasma drills. Squads of human marines, heavily armored, armed with shotguns and plasma cutters, poured into corridors, fighting with a ferocity that shocked even a Valari watching from afar. The first battle lasted only hours. When it ended, the void above Velar Prime was littered with shattered Zoran warships and drifting wreckage. The Dominion had suffered its first true defeat in living memory. The Valari's awakening. For the Valari, watching the humans fight was like seeing ghosts of their own past. Once, long ago, they too had wielded fleets that struck terror into tyrants. But centuries of peace had dulled them, turned their blades into relics. Now, seeing humanity's reckless courage reignited something buried deep within them. For the first time in generations, the Valari felt hope, not just survival, but defiance. Valari civilians emerged from their shelters, staring up at human warships in the skies above their homeworld. They whispered the old legends of how they had once saved Earth, and now the children of Earth had returned to save them. Some wept openly. Others lifted their voices in prayer, not to gods, but to humanity itself. The message to the galaxy. The galaxy did not remain ignorant of what had happened. News of the battle spread at light speed through trade networks and military relays. Grainy recordings of human ships tearing through Zoran formations went viral on hundreds of worlds. In smoky cantinas, in glittering council chambers, in the war rooms of ancient empires, one truth echoed. Humans had beaten the Zoran. Alien analysts scrambled to explain it. Some claimed it was luck. Others said the Dominion had been careless. Still others suggested hidden allies had bolstered the humans. But no explanation could erase the images of Zoran dreadnoughts shattering under human fire. Then came the broadcast. Across the stars, humanity sent a message on every major channel, translated into every known language. Long ago, when humanity was weak, the Valari saved us. We never forgot. Today we repay that debt. To the enemies of Velar, know this. Their enemies are now ours, and humanity does not abandon its own. The word struck the galaxy like thunder. Some species trembled with awe. Others whispered in fear. For humans would unleash such fury for the sake of a debt. What would they do against those they called enemies? The Dominion's humiliation. The Zoran were furious. The Dominion had ruled through fear for millennia, crushing anyone who resisted. They had never suffered such humiliation, not at the hands of an upstart species barely out of its cradle. Their warlords raged, swearing vengeance. Fleet production was tripled, slave soldiers conscripted, and entire sectors mobilized for war. But beneath their fury lay fear. The Dominion had always believed strength was absolute, yet here was proof that a younger, smaller species could outwit and outfight them. The cracks in their empire had been exposed for all to see. Humanity's resolve. For the humans, the victory was only the beginning. The Confederacy knew the Zoran would return in force. They knew the galaxy was watching, waiting to see if humanity's stand was a spark or a fleeting flame. But to humanity, this was never about politics or glory or even survival. It was about a promise, a debt that had endured for millennia. And until that debt was fully repaid, humanity would not stop. Already, new fleets were being raised. Colonies volunteered their industries. Men and women enlisted in droves, swearing to fight for Velar as if it were their own homeworld. And in the silence between the stars, a single truth began to echo. If this is how humanity fights for a friend, then what nightmare awaits those who make them an enemy? The Battle of Velar Prime had been more than a victory. It was a spark, and in the void of the galaxy, sparks could ignite wildfires. For the first time in centuries, the Zoran Dominion bled. For the first time in generations, the Valari had hope, and for the first time in memory, the galaxy realized that humanity was not a mere curiosity on the edge of known space, but a force capable of shaking the order of the stars. The Dominion strikes back. The Zoran could not allow such humiliation to stand. Within weeks, the Dominion gathered its might. Entire fleets were torn from occupation duties. Factories pressed into overdrive. Slave legions conscripted from subjugated worlds. The warlords promised swift vengeance. They declared that the humans would be crushed, their colonies burned, Their name erased from the records of history, but arrogance blinded them. They believed humanity had shown its full strength at Velar Prime. They could not imagine that the Confederacy had only revealed the first edge of its blade, the human war machine. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's capacity for war. For centuries, the elder empires had fought in ritualized ways, adhering to codes, doctrines, and patterns as predictable as the tides. But humans were not bound by tradition. In the shipyards of Mars, Europa, and Titan, entire new classes of warships were constructed. On the forge worlds of Proxima and New Eden, orbital cannons the size of mountains were built. Civilian freighters were converted into makeshift carriers, while swarms of AI-guided drones rolled off assembly lines by the millions. Every human colony contributed. Farmers became soldiers, miners became shipwrights, and scientists turned their ingenuity toward weapons of war. It was not just an army being raised. It was a civilization sharpening itself into a spear. And unlike the Zoran, who relied on fear to keep their vassals in line, humanity was driven by something far stronger: choice. Every human who fought did so because they had chosen to fight, not because they were forced. War without rules. The Dominion expected humanity to defend Velar space. Instead, the humans went on the offensive. In lightning raids, human fleets struck deep into Zoran territory. They targeted supply lines, mining worlds, shipyards. Instead of engaging the Dominion head-on, they bled them slowly, cutting off resources, sowing chaos, and vanishing before overwhelming reinforcements arrived. Entire sectors burned with unrest as Zoran slaves and subjects, emboldened by human victories, rose in rebellion. The Dominion suddenly found itself fighting not one enemy, but many. One tactic horrified the galaxy and cemented humanity's reputation. Orbital strikes using tungsten rods dropped from orbit at near-relativistic speeds. The humans called them rods from God. Cities that had stood for centuries were flattened in seconds. Zoran garrisons vanished under craters of glass. The galaxy whispered in terror. No one else fought this way. No one else dared to. The Valari's transformation. Meanwhile, the Valari themselves began to change. Once passive, broken, and resigned to extinction, they now stood beside humanity in battle. Human officers trained Valari crews in guerrilla tactics. Valari soldiers, and used the war, learned to fight with human ferocity. Their ships, once outdated, were refitted with human weaponry and AI systems. For the Valari, fighting alongside humans was like stepping into the reflection of what they once were. The more they fought, the more their pride and courage returned. Velar Prime, once a dying world, now thrummed with life. Human and Valari banners flew side by side. To the Valari, humanity was no longer just an ally. They were the fulfillment of an ancient bond, proof that their act of mercy so long ago had not been in vain. The Galaxy Watches. The galaxy could not ignore what was happening. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the elder races argued. Some demanded sanctions against humanity, fearing the balance of power was unraveling. Others secretly admired them, whispering that perhaps the age of the old empires was finally ending. Smaller species, the weak, the enslaved, the forgotten, saw something greater. They saw in humanity not just strength, but loyalty. The humans had not fought for conquest or wealth. They had fought for a debt, for an oath, for something no empire had cared about in centuries: honor. And for the downtrodden, that was more terrifying and inspiring than any weapon: the fear of humanity. But alongside admiration came dread. If humans would unleash such fury for the sake of a promise, what would they do for vengeance? What if humanity one day decided that a debt was owed to them? Would they demand the same ferocity, the same merciless loyalty? Old empires began to draw lines in secret. Some prepared to court humanity as an ally. Others plotted to contain them before their power grew too great. But no one, not even the mighty Zoran Dominion, doubted one truth anymore. Humanity had become a power in its own right: the turning battles. The Dominion threw fleet after fleet at the humans and Valari, but the Confederacy refused to be broken. At the Battle of Carthos Belt, human warships used the debris fields of shattered moons as weapons, slingshotting asteroids into Zoran formations. At Drakker's Gate, a single human carrier group ambushed the Dominion dreadnought fleet, crippling them with EMP strikes before tearing them apart. Every battle was different. Humanity never fought the same way twice. Their unpredictability terrified Zoran commanders, who relied on rigid tactics and overwhelming numbers. The Zoran began to fear human cunning, as much as their weapons. Rumors spread of human admirals who could predict enemy moves as if they were reading minds, of human soldiers who fought on with broken bones and burned flesh, refusing to surrender, of human weapons that could strike from nowhere, leaving only silence behind. The galaxy trembled not because of humanity's numbers or technology, but because of their will, the Valari's gratitude. On Velar Prime, Valari leaders held a ceremony unlike any other. Before the eyes of both their people and human representatives, they declared humanity their eternal kin. The words were broadcast across the stars. Once we saved them. Now they have saved us. From this day, our bloodlines and our fates are joined. To harm one is to harm both. It was more than an alliance. It was a declaration to the galaxy. The humans and Valari were bound, and nothing could break that bond. For the Zoran, it was a nightmare. For others, it was a beacon, a growing shadow. But even as humanity's reputation soared, whispers grew darker. The Confederacy's campaigns were ruthless, their victories absolute. Planets liberated from the Zoran often bore scars as deep as the conquered ones. Some allies began to fear that humanity's ferocity would not stop with the Dominion, and within human space, voices rose. Some called for restraint, others for expansion. For the first time, the galaxy wondered, was humanity's loyalty their greatest strength or their greatest danger? In the void of the galaxy, one truth became inescapable. Humanity had repaid a debt, and now the galaxy trembled at the cost. The war between the human Confederacy and the Zoran Dominion had grown into something larger than either side could have imagined. What began as a single act of loyalty, humanity answering the Valari's cry, had spiraled into a conflict that shook the foundations of the galaxy itself. The Valari were no longer dying. Humanity was no longer underestimated, and the Dominion, once the terror of the stars, now stood bloodied and desperate. The end was coming. But how it ended would echo for millennia. The final campaign. The Dominion, though wounded, was not yet broken. Their fleet still outnumbered humanity's, their armies still vast, their resources still deep. But numbers alone could not save them. Humanity had turned war into an art form, and the Valari had sharpened themselves alongside their allies. Together, they planned to strike not just to wound the Dominion, but to end them. The target was Zarkul, the Dominion's throne world, a fortress world surrounded by defense rings, shipyards, and legions beyond count. No one had ever breached its defenses. No one had even tried. But humanity was not no one. They came with fire. The largest fleet ever assembled by the Confederacy, and Valari emerged from warp above Zarkul. Tens of thousands of ships, dreadnoughts, carriers, drone swarms poured into the system. The Dominion had prepared for them, deploying walls of ships and defense platforms. The battle was apocalyptic. Human dreadnoughts hurled kinetic slugs that ripped apart capital ships in single blows. Valari war cruisers unleashed psionic weaponry not seen for centuries, tearing to the minds of Zoran commanders. Swarms of drones blackened the void, overwhelming defenses with sheer, relentless numbers. On the surface, human marines and Valari shock troops fought street by street, block by block, against the Dominion's elite. Cities became infernos. Skies rained fire. The ground shook with the thunder of orbital bombardments. For 3 days and nights, the war raged without pause. On the 4th, the Dominion broke. The fall of Zarkul. The Zoran High warlord, once believed unassailable, was dragged from the ruins of his citadel by human marines. Dominion fleets scattered, their will to fight shattered. Slave worlds revolted in open rebellion, tearing down their masters as news of Zarkul's fall spread like wildfire. The unthinkable had happened. The Zoran Dominion was no more. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy's greatest predator had been slain, and it had been done not by an ancient power, not by a coalition of empires, but by a species the galaxy had once dismissed as children. By humanity, the galaxy reacts. The news spread faster than any fleet. On every world, in every empire, across every trade network, the same whispers arose. The humans repaid a debt, and they destroyed the Dominion. For the weak and the oppressed, it was a beacon of hope. If humanity could topple the Dominion, then no empire was truly invincible. Rebellion spread like wildfire, as subjects rose against tyrants in the belief that change was possible. But for the great powers, the whispers were not a hope, but a fear. For if humans would do this to the Valari, if they would unleash such wrath for a single debt, what would they do if the debt was vengeance? What would they do if wronged? The galaxy trembled, not at what humanity had done, but at what humanity might one day do. The Valari's gratitude. On Velar Prime, a ceremony was held beneath the twin suns. Valari leaders, once resigned to extinction, stood tall once more. Before billions of witnesses, they declared humanity their eternal kin. We saved them once, and they saved us in return. From this day forward, the Valari and humanity are one people. To strike at one is to strike at both. The banners of Confederacy and the Valari Union were raised side by side, and a vow was made, never again would either stand alone. To the Valari, it was a fulfillment of an ancient bond. To humanity, it was the closing of a chapter long left unfinished. The debt had been repaid, the human dilemma. But victory came with shadows. Humanity had revealed its strength, and with it, its nature. They were loyal beyond reason, ferocious beyond measure, and unrelenting in their pursuit of promises kept. Allies admired them, but also feared them. Rivals plotted in secret, desperate to contain them before their influence spread further. Even within the Confederacy, voices rose. Some celebrated the triumph and urged humanity to withdraw, to rebuild, to rest. Others whispered that the galaxy was ripe for reshaping, that if humanity could topple the Dominion, perhaps it was their destiny to lead the stars. The Valari, though grateful, also watched with unease. They knew humanity's heart, but they also saw the danger. A people so bound by loyalty and memory that even kindness could spark a war that reshaped the galaxy. The final broadcast, when the war was over, when the fleets returned to their ports and the soldiers laid down their arms, humanity sent one last message across the stars. It was simple, spoken by the Confederacy's High Chancellor, her voice steady and cold. We repaid a debt, nothing more. But let the galaxy remember this. Humanity forgets nothing. We forgive rarely. And we always repay, whether in kindness or in kind. The words echoed in every council chamber, every war room, every home across the stars. And in that silence, the galaxy shivered. The debt paid. The Valari survived. Humanity endured. The Dominion was gone. But the cost was more than ships and lives. It was fear. Fear that humanity had risen too quickly, that their loyalty was as dangerous as their fury, that their memory was too long to be safe. The galaxy now knew a truth it could never forget. Humanity was no longer a minor species. They were a storm, and storms, once unleashed, could never truly be controlled.